Hello everyone, I'm Luo Qi from South Central Minzu University. Welcome to our course, Green China. Before exploring the history of Chinese environmental protection, we answer the three questions in the video first. 万物各得其和以生，各得其养以成 means all things must be in harmony with heaven if they are to grow. And all things must obtain the proper nourishment from heaven in order to become complete. Here, heaven refers to nature and its laws. As to the second question, Yu the Great adopted an approach more oriented toward drainage and less towards containment, while his father attempted to block the flood waters with dams and dikes. The two examples President Xi cited are Dujiangyan Weirs and the ecological protection of the Yellow River. Now, we are going to look back at the great efforts made by Chinese to tame the floods and protect our mother river. All civilizations depend on available water, and of course, rivers are a fine source. Rivers were attractive locations because they provided a steady supply of drinking water and made the land fertile for growing crops. For those cultures that depended on them, rivers were the lifeblood. You'll see that the societies connected with these essential rivers all qualify as core ancient civilizations. Egypt has the Nile River. Mesopotamia has the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. China has the Yellow and the Yangtze rivers. The Yellow River is called the cradle of Chinese civilization. It is the second longest river in China, second to the Yangtze. Although rivers helped sustain ancient civilizations, they also brought about yearly floods, which destroyed everything. So, the earliest efforts made by man to live harmoniously with nature could be reflected in the history of fighting floods. The Great Flood of China, also known as the Guanyu myth, was a major flood event that continued for at least 2 generations. It was during the reign of Emperor Yao, the great-grandson of the Yellow Emperor, that the Great Flood began. A flood so vast that no part of Yao's territory was spared, and both the Yellow River and the Yangtze valleys flooded. The scene was described vividly in the Book of History, Canon of Yao. Like endless water boiling, the flood is pouring forth destruction, boundless and overwhelming. It overtops hills and mountains. Rising and ever rising, it threatens the very heavens. How the people must be groaning and suffering. According to the main mythological tradition, Gun's plan of flood control was through the use of a continuously self-expanding soil, xirang. By utilizing the special powers of the magic soil, Gun attempted to block and barricade the flood waters with dams he built. Even after 9 years of the efforts of Gun, the flood continued to rage on, leading to the increase of all sorts of social disorders. Learning from his father's lesson, Yu the Great resorted to digging canals together with widening or deepening existing channels. As is described in the classic of Mountains and Seas, 禹开九州，通九道. He opened passages for the streams throughout the 9 provinces and conducted them to the seas. He deepened the channels and conducted them to the streams. After his work in controlling the flood waters, he became sole emperor and went on to found the Xia dynasty. Yu the Great, an important figure in both Chinese mythology and history, has made enormous contributions to the integration of Chinese tribes and ethnic groups. Striving to protect all ethnic groups, he respected their living habits and passed on advanced culture, arts and techniques to them. It is the unity and solidarity of ancient Chinese that guarantees the triumph over the great floods. What's more, facing disasters, his persistence and selfless contribution has formed the backbone of Chinese civilization. In one common story, Yu had only been married 4 days when he was given the task of fighting the flood. He said goodbye to his wife, saying that he did not know when he would return. For 13 years, he never stepped into his house, although having passed it 3 times. His son was born during his absence, but he still did not come back. His spirit has been inherited and carried forward by the community of Chinese nation, which has been vividly demonstrated in the combat against COVID-19. Moreover, much progress was also made in terms of land management and agricultural techniques. He organized the people to rebuild their shelters and develop agriculture by fully utilizing water and soil. He also directed the masses to dig ditches to lead the water flowing into the croplands. With his great help, people lived happy lives afterwards. Yu the Great has been highly honored by the Chinese people, and several statues and temples have been built to honor him. After his death, his son buried his father on the mountain and offered sacrifices at his grave, and the tradition of imperial sacrifices for him began. Emperors all down the dynasties personally traveled to the mountain to pay their respects. During the Song dynasty, the worship of Yu the Great became a regular ceremony. In the Ming and the Qing dynasties, sacrificial prayers and texts were offered, and officials from the court were dispatched to the temple. Poems, couplets, and essays were composed in praise of him. Later, the sacrifices for him were also continued by Republican leaders. In May 2006, the ritual ceremony for Yu the Great was added into the first National Intangible Cultural Heritage list. That's all. Thank you for listening.